Welcome to my humble little office. My name is R. Keith Andrews. I'm a spiritual guide and paranormal adept. The journey continues today on November 3rd, 2024 at approximately 4:30 p.m. PST. Now, I've made this my life's journey to remind people that working together, we can make this a better world for virtually everybody. I bill myself as a spiritual guide because the tools I offer are the same tools I personally use in my day to day life. And the philosophies of life I talk about are the same philosophies I guide virtually every movement I make by. With this in mind, I know these tools will work for you because they continue to work for me and have literally worked for thousands of other people over the years, depending with varying degrees of success, depending on their own personal efforts. Now, before we get into it, we do have Storm in the background there, man, keeping tech running properly and ensuring that we don't have problem children popping in. Okay, and then we've got LA Moon, who is our other moderator that, on top of keeping things running smoothly and encouraging the communication lines in the chat room, she also keeps a real close eye on where my health is. Because it's wonderful having having hiccup on the air or yawning on the air. Not quite so enjoyable watching somebody have a heart attack. Now, with that in mind, we have in with the gold. Amazingly enough, well done. We have Nathan from the Quantum Show. And Nathan, that show the other night on Saturday night was absolutely great. Got a little interesting there for a bit, but it did work out well enough. But I am glad you managed to pop in, and yeah, you're listening from work, which really means things can get confusing. And then we have Joe Stewart in with the silver. How's it going, Joe? Glad you could join us. The nice part about it is I'm looking at this whole situation here. Okay, there's a lot of things going on in the world. A lot of them, quite frankly, we could focus on the negative. But today, we're going to take a look at the art of creative writing. Okay, now, you'll notice I said the art of creative writing, not the art of creative marketing. That's a problem I'm still working on. And absolutely, guys, if you have any idea on how to make it work better, let me know, please. I mean, let's face it, I've got 8 books in print, and I'm working on others. Marketing is not my strong suit, which reminds me, didn't get a lot of this done today. Oh, where are we here? Things I have to get done. And again, this list method, by the way, creative writing, you'll find whether you're using a clipboard, a computer, a notepad, it doesn't matter. You will find notes are really convenient. Okay, but I have to make certain that I do this because I know there were some people that went through Buy Me a Coffee, which, by the way, at the top of the stream, you'll find a neat little link. buymeacoffee.com/innervoiceJ. That will get you to any of the books I've written. And especially especially none. All of them are there. Okay, including the ability to get in touch with me from a consulting standpoint. But I have been lax. Today was my gaming day. I game Thursday night and I game Sunday morning. Needless to say, gaming does take up a lot of time on occasion. So as soon as I get done the stream today, those of you that have left something in Buy Me a Coffee will be dealt with. Okay, you will be responded to. Now, just something I just found out yesterday. Apparently, you're going to have to order one thing at a time. Okay, apparently you can't do multiple orders. Exactly why I'm not 100% certain. But one of the things that we will find, creative writing simply means let your mind do what it will. Yeah, Hilly goes, I couldn't sell an Eskimo a heater. I knew a lady that could not figure out what the problem was. She was trying to sell Avon, and try as she might, she had a hiccup with it. Of course, we got to understand, this woman was close to 6 feet tall. She was trying to sell Avon. She was close to 6 feet tall and about 3 feet wide, and nothing against her because most of it was muscle, but she was also overweight. And the biggest kicker in the pants, she was a farrier. Okay, as in, she was the one that put horseshoes on horses, amongst other things. Now, what do we got here? Oh, there we are. Last night we were watching Crown Jewel streaming on Peacock Network. Oh, that's right. And I was intending on saying that to you there, Joe. But in this case, we'll go with happy belated birthday. Okay. So now you finally became an adult, eh? And as my father used to put it, do you feel any older? But let's get down to the creative writing thing. Remember, whenever you're writing, write something you know about. Okay, something you're familiar with, something that catches your eye. Don't worry about writing what other people are going to like. Okay, because I will tell you, if you try and write for what other people are looking for, you're likely going to miss the boat. But we got to remember, you've got roughly 8 billion people on the planet. Okay, now granted, you may only have 5 billion that can actually read English. Okay, or some variation of it. But in my case, when I got into things, I started creative writing when I was back in grade 10. And all I did was I started off at the beginning. Of course, let me just take a look at this. Just have to go to the appendix here. This is actually, and we'll get to it in a second. Whoop. There we are. Now, this is literally a life's work. Okay. The initial, I read this earlier. I read this in a prior cast. Okay. But I literally started off in grade 10, and all I wrote to start with was, after eons of creating, Ivana became bored with wandering, homeless, and formless. Thus it was that she decided to create a new planet. Now, the entire story as it was first written is in the back of this book and the rest of them. Okay, but what I did was I looked at it, I found a way, I came up with a concept, and that's the first thing when you're looking at writing. Come up with a concept that is, number one, catches your personal attention. Number two, as you're putting it together, keep it internally consistent. You don't have to worry about whether or not it makes sense in this world, unless you are writing something set in this world. Okay, now I commend science fiction writers. Okay, because usually science fiction, in my opinion, has some modicum of trackable information where you can look at the science, you can say this is how it works according to today's world. However, the birth of the wolf pack takes place post-apocalyptic. Okay, meaning all the rules don't have to apply. But when I wrote the original story, I found a way inside these books to combine monotheism, polytheism, as in one God, multiple gods, creationism, and evolution. Okay, as in God made the people, and or if you look at evolution, things evolve together. We also managed to combine ancient races, the races that evolved on Earth, off-worlders, the ones that evolved outside of the world, okay, as well as technology and magic. And then of course we combine that other neat little idea of of spirituality and physicality. Now, this is all done under one genre. Yes, multifaceted, absolutely. Okay, now what do we got here? Joe came in with the gold, and Ian Madden, you are in with the silver. How you doing? So as you can see, I've combined, of course, I combine the ancient world as in swords and shields and that sort of thing, horseback riding, plus advanced technologies. Now, much as that is all, that seems to be trying to take everything into consideration, oddly enough, it really is. Because as I wrote it, and all you do to start, I had the overall picture. This is the world. Okay. And I went, okay, that's it. Now, it is best when you put the framework together, just like building a building, get the framework written down. Okay, so you can go, this is what I've done. Okay, this is what the world works like. Because for a story to be enjoyable, it has to be internally consistent. Now, the neat part about it is that's only the framework. Okay, and once you start doing that, you'll find other things come in. Not the least of which, because I was only 15 when I started writing that. Okay, I was in grade 10. So, I started writing, I wrote the outline in grade 10. And then life got in the way and I sat on it for quite a while. Okay, now when did The Birth of the Wolf Pack come out? I'm just looking to see when I actually printed it. Whoop. Sure, I'm going to try and find it and can't because my hand won't work. Now, I'm just looking to see if I can figure out. There we are. It was actually printed. The Birth of the Wolf Pack was actually printed in 2019, 5 years ago. Now, it's really annoyed me that it's taken me so long to get number 3 out. But when I did it, I took the frame and I went, okay, here's the world. This is what you're working with. Now, for you, okay, let me ask you this. Do any of you have an interest? Well, the fact you're here says yes. Do any of you have an idea as to writing? And bear in mind, writing, whatever you're doing is creative. It's that simple. Now, depending on who you talk to, these are science fiction or science fantasy. Okay, you pick which. Look, we had something pop up here. Rachel, oh, look at that. Ian's in with the silver. Renee, you are in with the bronze. And Rachel, you are in with honorable mention. Now, I am working on a couple of ideas, but whatever you're working on in the way of writing, whether it might be a story, it might be a short story, maybe you're into writing children's stories, or perhaps poetry. Okay, now, all of those I work with. I am not a screenwriter. However, I will be looking for one in time, once I get finished book 3. Now, neat part, this was the schedule I was supposed to be on. That came out in 2019. Book 2, when did it come out? I think either 2020 or maybe 2021. It came out in 2021. Okay, that's book 2, The End of an Epoch. Now, as I was writing, I found something out. I had the entire framework done, and that's where you start. Figure out the background of where you're starting. Oh, okay, you figure out the backbone or the background of where you're starting. When I wrote The Birth of the Wolf Pack, I started because it was science fantasy. It's a science fantasy book. Okay, because I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, which most of you know about, and Aftermath, which was a post-apocalyptic game. Okay, I had so much fun with the people I was gaming with during game and outside of game that I decided to commemorate it. Now, because of that, if you've ever gamed, one of the easiest places to start off is right smack in the middle of a bar. Okay, you start, it doesn't matter how much detail you've got to start. I started off in a very simple layout, laid out the background of the bar. This is the scene. Okay, there's the environment you're sitting in. Doesn't have to be entirely complete. Okay, and then I picked a main character to start with. Okay, he started off just sitting in the bar before things happened. Yes, you do have to pick where you're starting. But the neat part is once I did that, as soon as I started writing, okay, the story takes on. If you're writing in a field you're comfortable with, that you know, okay, that you enjoy, doesn't matter if other people really enjoy it. It matters if you do. Okay, that's the real critical factor. Now, because of that, when I started writing, I literally started off with him sitting in the bar, and then I let the story write itself. Now, I basically didn't stop the first book I wrote. Okay, and all you do, you've got your layout, start the character off. Now, depending on what you've decided you're working with, okay, if you're, and it really has a lot of variables, but decide, get a picture, a feel for the person, where they're starting, and what are they doing? How does the story start? Now, with this one, Jeremiah Wolfstrand is the lead character. And yes, I built him. He was a character I ran in Aftermath. Okay, so I used him as a background because I knew him well. You start off with the character where it is, and then you put yourself in that seat. And I find it best if you either picture it as you're right there in the seat of the character, or you turn around and you write it as in you're watching that person act. You've got to decide, are you going to write it first person, or are you going to write it third person? Now, before I go on with that, because I do like the audience in here, like the viewers in here, people in the chat room. Joe is going here. Oh, Joe goes, had an amazing experience last night. Also in the backyard, a white light traveling north to south. Stopped, turned around, heading west, blinked red, and exited the back entrance road of the cemetery. This is that activity we were waiting for again. Now, when I turned around, I started Jeremiah off in the bar. Now, you pick your character. Are you going to write first person or third person? First person is challenging, because you've got to write it from the standpoint of, I was here. I saw this. Again, it gets really tricky because if you're writing true first person, Okay, you don't know what all is going on. You can talk about what's going through the first person's mind, but you don't go outside the bar and say, "Oh, John and Jack were outside. They got into an argument." You don't get to say that. Or more to the point, if you're writing true first person, you don't go there. Okay, if you're sitting in the bar, I was sitting in the bar. I was having a nice, was having a nice drink, a tall drink of wine, and I heard an argument between two males just outside the open window. Okay, I turned to look and saw two people fighting. Now, you can probably give a description, but you don't necessarily know what the fight's going on. So the fight goes on, and you're sitting there still drinking your wine, and I watch this guy in a torn shirt, come staggering back into the room. Okay, stumbles across the floor, tripping over a couple of chairs. He's getting back to his feet. When he gets closer, I can see he's got blood coming out of his stomach, out of his abdomen. His shirt is torn, and he's bleeding profusely. At this point, you have no, as a reader, you have no point because you're right there with the first person. So you can lay it out that way, and the person is completely the reader is totally in the dark because they're going through it the same speed the character is. Okay, now one of the things, and here's a neat little part. If you're writing third person, which is literally what I wrote the Elderbrockian Chronicles in. Okay, third person can be really tricky because you've got lots of different characters going on, doing their own thing that you gotta try and keep track of, which is where a lot of the problem can come in. Okay, so I'm not sure which one is the most important, is the most efficient, but the Elderbrockian Chronicles are written third person. I am going to be writing, I've already decided on it, and it's going to be done in bits and pieces. I've got a couple of ideas as to what I'm going to do with writing a story first person. Okay, for some reason, I find writing is very useful for me, it's very beneficial for me. But it has to remain internally consistent. Now, of course, if you're writing first person, you really only have one character you've got to develop a personality for. In the case of third person, you've got all kinds of characters you've got to have personality profiles. Okay, now to do that, yes, I started off writing with pen and paper. Okay, and then you'd write a bunch, then you'd have to rewrite it, and you end up going through reams of paper. Right now, I am looking at the other side of it. Okay, right about now, I am looking at, I am writing, like, while I'm writing the story on computer, like, I still write a lot of it by hand because I find it flows more easily. When I get it onto the computer, I've also got an Excel sheet to keep track of the characters. Now, if I open, where are we here? Nope. Let's open that up. And, what am I doing? Let's shrink down a couple of these. And we go to the compendium. Whoop. There we are. Oh, that was not what I needed. That was. Now, I built a file for the compendium for the entire series. Now, to give you an idea, I go all the way back to that. You go to the main. There we are. Scroll all the way down. This will give you an idea. I have at present different characters, different communities and what have you. 512 different people that I've already got in the storyline. Okay, you do that in order to stay consistent. So when you bring a character in, you can look at what he's up to and go, this is what he did. Okay, but the key factor, you gotta be internally consistent. Have the rules in your world. Number one, they gotta be worked out on paper, but they have to be worked out in a fashion that they continually feed back on themselves. This is why writing it down on paper is really beneficial. Let's bring that one up. One of the difficult parts of writing is realizing it's your world. Oddly enough, this is the same thing where it comes to life. Okay, you are faced with things that you've got to deal with. Some of them are some of the laws you have to deal with in the real world. You have to follow. Nice part about writing, about creative writing, you get to decide which rules. Okay, now I find myself creative writing rather almost, I was going to say lethargic, but that's wrong. I find creative writing very therapeutic. Okay, now I personally write in 5 different genres. One thing I am considering, and absolutely, guys, if you've got an idea, if you've got input, pop it into the chat room. If you've got a question, drop it in the chat room in all caps. It makes it easier for me to find. Okay, now I'm looking at the creative side of it, and you take the first character. Now I mentioned we had Jeremiah. Now, what is Jeremiah? You gotta have with the main character, whether you're talking first person or third, with your primary protagonist. Okay, the primary good guy. You gotta have an idea what drives him. What made him the way he is. And this is something that you don't have to tell the audience. You don't have to tell your readership until you go down the road. But you've got to have a clear idea in your head. Now, when I was playing Aftermath, my character was a chap by the name of Jeremiah Wollstrand. Okay. When I built him, I told my game master, I said, look, we're playing post-apocalyptic. My character has Jeremiah's got a simple outlook. I didn't ask for the world to go to heck in a handbasket, but dang it did. So I'm going to have the best of the best. That was what drove him. Ironically enough, or intriguingly enough, you pick. Okay. I myself came to the same conclusion. Okay. I dug myself into an absolute shambles. Okay. Now, I didn't ask for this world to turn upside down, but I have decided, much like Jeremiah, I am going to have the best of the best. Now, once you've got your primary character, now Jeremiah, okay, because it was post-apocalyptic, now when you're writing a book, okay, when you're writing a story, if you're talking science fantasy, there are differences when you start writing children's stories. Okay, but because I was looking at post-apocalyptic, I turned around and went, okay, number one, he's ex-military. In this, now bear in mind, so am I, sort of. My family was military. But Jeremiah spent a couple of years in the military. Didn't like the way it was going. Didn't like the fact that he was being handed orders and rules that didn't add up. Okay, he is trained in medical. He is also a linguist, meaning he is very good at speaking different languages. Jeremiah is the kind of person that will talk his way out of whatever he can, but he is absolutely self-confident. By the way, not a strong suit of mine, especially in a combat setup. But Jeremiah was absolutely calm, and he would try and talk his way out of anything. And if he couldn't, you can bet you were in for a world of hurt. Well, we start Jeremiah off in a bar, okay, and started things happening with the activity in a post-apocalyptic bar. Now, you guys have seen lots of shows, you've read lots of books that have conflict going on in a confined space. Now, I will tell you, this is not for a 6 or 7-year-old, okay? Because does it have violence in it? Lots of violence, usually very heavily orchestrated or choreographed. But if you look at Jeremiah right here, I don't know if you can see it there, but that's the hilt of a katana. Now, Jeremiah carries that katana with him. It's a favorite weapon of his. Now you can picture when he pulls that out, a lot of people are going to get hurt. So he's sitting in the bar, very relaxed. Understand, when I had him relaxed, he's got his back to the wall. He's got his legs stretched out beneath the table in front of him. And he's just relaxing. Now, the neat part there is myself. Whenever I go into a restaurant, I will put my back to the wall, and I usually have my feet stretched out beneath the table. Okay, like I said, when you're writing, depending on what you're writing, in my case, I wrote it with the main character, with me knowing a lot about the main character. He came out of Aftermath. Okay. But when the fight in the bar starts out, now let me ask you guys, if you're reading a novel, how many chapters do you give that novel to get your attention? Everybody's got their own limits. I've seen some people that will read the entire book. Okay. Now, one of the biggest things that I found is you've got to get the person's attention. This is why when you're looking at a movie, they usually have a trailer that shows something exciting. Quite frankly, more often than not, they show you the highlight. Okay. Well, when I looked at it, I go, some people can read 6, 7 chapters. I looked at it and went, what's going to hold my attention? Am I going to set the scene and lay it out? Or am I going to bring it in a hurry? In chapter 1, okay, there is a hint of a barroom fight. Okay, just a hint of one that takes off in the background. It does explain Jeremiah stepping into the fight. That's in chapter 1. Okay, again, it's post-apocalyptic. This is not this is not an adult entertainment book. As a matter of fact, yes, there's a lot of blood, there's a lot of violence, but I determined I wanted everybody to be able to read it within reason. Do not give this to a 6-year-old. Number one, they won't understand it. Well, no. Number one, I write graphic. Okay? But for those of you that think, somewhere in there's got to be some sort of an intimate site, an intimate scene. I don't write adult entertainment. Okay? At least not in that category. As a matter of fact, the closest thing, I can't tell you what chapter, okay, but the closest thing that I would say to an adult version of that, okay, is there's a rescue that takes place, and we'll get down the road to that in a while. But you can hint at what's going on without a problem. Yeah. LA's going, I generally need to have some confirmation that I'm reading what I've agreed to. For myself, if I write a book, it starts out with action from the first. And that was what I was looking at. So in the first chapter, somewhere down the road, I cannot tell you what chapter, probably just past the halfway mark, there's a rescue that takes place where Jeremiah and his compatriots get together and rescue a bunch of captives. Okay. And I think there's 16. And here's Jeremiah. He gets up in the morning and he's doing a head count because he's got everybody, quietly laying there. He's doing a head count and he goes 3, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12. Where's the last two? And then I just pan it over. And Jeremiah goes, and he spots off at the edge of their clearing. He spots a set of bushes swaying rhythmically back and forth. And Jeremiah goes, got him, and goes on with the rest of the day. We ignore what's going on behind that. Adults can figure it out. Okay. Now, understand, when I wrote the original manuscript for The Birth of the Wolf Pack, I wrote it just bang, bang, bang. It just flew. And when I first wrote it, I wrote 250 pages. Okay. And just about, I think, pretty much every second chapter was a major conflict, was a major battle. Bloodier than all get out, hectic as you can imagine. Okay. Very detailed choreography. And then I went and filled in the middle. By the time I got finished, I'd added another 150 pages of atmosphere, of landscaping. Okay, so you've got to have the idea of what the world is. You don't have to have all the layout, where are all the cities. It might be an idea. Now, I went this way. Okay, when you're writing, your world is going to require certain consistencies. Because it's got to be relatable in some fashion. If it's not relatable to the readers, they're not going to be able to follow it. They're not going to be interested in it. Okay, so you're going to have a superstructure of what the world is. Okay, now, the reality is there's a lot of ways of doing that. Okay, and there is, by the way, no right way and no wrong way. Okay, but like I said, in chapter 1, there's a hint of a fight. In chapter 2, there is a full-blown battle. Okay, 10-1 odds. Okay, 7 dead, 2 badly wounded, 1 gets away pretty much unscathed. That's against Jeremiah. Now remember, I told you Jeremiah is absolutely deadly on his feet. Okay. Now, of course, you can't have a story that is just conflict. There's got to be a mix. You've got to have the adversarial side, the combat, the competition, the struggle, if you will. Okay. You've got to have some passive settings that just lay out a little bit of atmosphere. And, a little bit of romance is not a bad move. Okay, and definitely emotion. But you also have to have a smattering of comedy. Okay, depending on the story. Now, with the Elderbachian Chronicles, okay, I managed to combine all of them. There is a scene in there where one of the characters, and we'll get to him in a little bit, one of the characters happens to be very proficient in combat, what have you, but cocky as they get. And somebody ends up captive, and one of his captors come in and go, "Are you threatening me?" It actually goes, it starts off, he walks in and goes, "Now, what are we going to do with you?" And Dirk Waterstone turns around and goes, and yes, Dirk Waterstone, by the way, was built by another gamer. Okay, so Dirk looks at this guy, at this chap, and goes, "Well, I'd suggest you let me and my friends go, and we'll carry on with our lives, and you carry on with yours." The guy goes, "You're in no position to threaten me." Dirk looks at him and goes, "Oh, wait a minute, you thought that was a threat? No, 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 no. If I was going to threaten you, I'd be telling you, let me go right now, or everyone in this compound is going to die, because my friends and I are just going to wipe the blood of the floor with you." Okay? And it's just this sort of thing. Now, when you're writing, again, find a way to bring the characters to life. Find a way to bring as much of the atmosphere of the area, as many senses as you can get. Okay, meaning, sights, sounds, if there is a way to write smell in. Okay, absolutely necessary. Okay, of course, you've got to have the emotional interaction of the characters. And this is why, when you're writing, it's absolutely imperative. You've got a personality outlook on what the person looks like, what kind of behavior they have, what's their background. Understand, Jeremiah was low and was average income, got into the military. Dirk Waterstone was high society. Okay, he grew up literally with a silver spoon in his hand. Okay, now the main group, the wolf pack. That's the other thing with any story you're writing. It's got to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Each book has to be standalone. Okay, now the neat part about it, this is really the 10th book in the series. Okay, what do we got here? There we are. This is literally the 10th book in the series, but it's the first one that came to print. Now, when you take a look at that, okay, you've got to have a way for it to come online. But each book has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. In The Birth of the Wolf Pack, Jeremiah starts off on his own. When I wrote the book, okay, I turned it over to my artist. That was a challenge finding one of those. But turned it over to him. He came up with the idea of the wolves in the front. Now, this picture didn't exist in the original writing. But when John, my artist, came back with the idea about putting a few wolves in the front, I ran with it and wrote the scene in. Okay, you've got to have, now with these, that's book one. By the end of the book, the wolf pack has been pulled together. Okay, when I start with book two, same thing, it's got to stand on its own without the information from book one. For it to work well, you've got to, in my opinion, be able to read either book on their own. Now, this is actually the first two books of a trilogy. Okay, and so I've got both are independent, but when I put them together, okay, two things you come to realize. There's a third book, so it has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay, it's all got to tie together. Now, in my case, I've got flashbacks going to and from, flashbacks and foreshadowings throughout the series. Okay, and here's the other neat little part about it. Okay, on the spine, where are we here? On the spine, you'll see that it creates one picture. Obviously, you can't see all of the picture, but then we take this. Then we take these, and together they make a complete picture. Okay, now all 12 books are part of an overall collage. And one of the things I ran into, and this is a massive problem, okay, it takes money to get this together. Something I'm in desperately short need of. But I'm working on that. So when you're writing, it, like I said, it's got to be internally consistent. So if you look at this chap here, this is Jeremiah. All the way through it, you'll know who he is. Okay. As you go along, you've got the main character doing what he will. Now, here's something about it. Okay. And I'm going to shift gears on you for just half a second. Again, if you've got questions, if you got suggestions, absolutely speak. Okay. Now, this particular one, different genre. This is a children's story. Okay. In point of fact, when my eldest son was only 2 years old, I got bored of reading the same stories to him, the same ones I grew up with. You know the ones, if you're my age, you do. Dr. Seuss, the Berenstain Bears, okay, these types of stories, Mickey Mouse. I got tired of reading them. So this one night, I rattled this story off, Mr. Dreamcatcher. Now you'll notice, adult version of a story. What? And a book for adults, for, teenagers and above, really. You'll notice very intricate artwork. Okay. Now, then we go to a children's story. And again, when you're writing it, when you're writing, it still has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But the artwork in this book, I actually did this artwork all on my own. Okay. Oddly enough, I actually did this with a computer. For me, that's a remarkable challenge. The important factor with Mr. Dreamcatcher is I wrote it when my son was 2. Okay. Once I wrote it, I just rattled it off the top of my head. And it got to the point where he would not go to bed without hearing this story until about a month before he turned 8. Okay. What prompted my writing this was if I was out of town, his mother would have to read the same story. So I popped it down in point form. Then it evolved into this. Okay. But it's written as a child's story. Okay. Literally as a children's story. And I mean, it started off with, because remember, my son was only 2 years old. So I started off to get his attention. It was time for Daniel to go to bed, but he had trouble sleeping a lot of the time. So his mom and dad bought him a dream catcher to guard him while he slept. Okay, I personalized it for him. Turned around and went, okay, here it is. Okay, and I wrote this out, did the drawing for him. He actually even helped with designing some of the characters. Okay, and with naming them. So we look in here. And again, creative writing is not done just on your own. This is how it started. Now, in the book, okay, you get to see what Mr. Dreamcatcher himself actually looks like. Okay, And then, whoop. And who have we got here? Just trying to remember the name. Oh, yes. Then we have Graph. Now, this critter here, this is Graph. He's a nightmare. Okay. It was my son that picked the name for him. Okay. Yes, I did all the artwork for him. You know. So we end up with Graph. We end up with him in a little bit of a conflict. Okay, but it's written in very simple words. We're dealing with reading for a child. Okay, or writing for a child. Okay, now you've got your bad people, and then you've got this neat little chap here, who is a nice dream. Okay, and this guy, my son literally looked at him and went, I asked him what he wanted, what he thought of for a name for a nice character, for a nice dream. And my son looks at me and he smiles and he goes, I want to call him Tree. Well, he got called Tree and that was how he came about. Okay, but the idea was to hold his attention. So I wrote it in a different fashion. Now again, these books are available through the Buy Me a Coffee link at the top of the stream. You know, I'm looking at this. Joe goes, all my dream journals has everything in them Keith is talking about. You know, I'm not suggesting you do this, but it does have that potential, Joe, of turning it into a book. Although that might be an interesting challenge. Now, when you're writing a children's story, understand you are much better off writing a children's story with enlarged figures, enlarged expressions, and what have you. You don't go into the subtleties. Okay, when we look at the birth of the wolf pack, okay, you've got a number of things going on. This, like I said, this is Jeremiah. Down here is a chap. Now, this guy is an ex-assassin. Understand, Jeremiah is a pacifist. If he can work his way out of a fight, if he can talk his way out, he will. Wilhelm, okay, is an ex-assassin. But the thing is, he left the assassin work because his country turned on him. Okay, so him and a number of his compatriots decided to vacate. Okay, and then the world went to heck in a handbasket. But Wilhelm and Jeremiah connect very, very strongly. And understand, the chap that built Wilhelm, he and I ended up sharing an apartment for a while. Now he doesn't talk to me at all. As a matter of fact, none of the people that were written into this, save one, talk to me at all. And that one, I'm the one that has to reach out because they don't. Life does that to you on occasion. But Wilhelm was an ex-assassin. Okay, so he walks away. He ends up connecting with Jeremiah. They become thick as thieves. Then we have this young lass here. Okay, Tanya Jan Scott. And yes, she was built by a female and by a female gamer. You know, the reality is when you're looking at gaming, and this is why I say, when you're writing, pick a topic you're familiar with. Okay, any of you that are familiar with vehicles, like for instance, let's take Nathan. Okay, from the Quantum Show. Nathan is always building little robots. Him writing a story or coming up with a storyline, okay, would inevitably be really well done with vehicles involved or with robots involved because he's got the ability to draw them to life. Now, I'm just looking. Yeah, I'll look at that in a bit. Now, again, you got to build your character with internal consistency. Now, to give you an idea, there's a lot about Tanya that doesn't come to light in the first story, in the first book. Okay, all you do with creative writing, give a backbone, make it something that you can write, that you can hold together. Okay, but consistency is critical. Okay, everywhere Jeremiah goes, you'll find him with his katana. Okay, everywhere that Tanya goes, you'll find, well, best way to describe Tanya is she's a hillbilly from heck. Okay, she is a woman that will not back down and will be right in the thick of it with you. Okay, there is a scene way down the road, and I'm not going to tell you where Tanya actually kills a guy, literally hits his head on the ground so hard his brains pop out. Then she cuts him in half. And when I wrote this, I'm going through it, and that scene is not in this book. That's actually down the road. But when I'm writing it, I looked at it and went, I didn't just write that, did I? Because I get into a flow and the characters basically write themselves. So I'm running this out and I went, that could not have happened. And sure enough, I went back and read a couple of pages backwards and found out that, yeah, in fact, she had hit him so hard to kill him in the first place, but it was happening so fast, she turned around and cut him in half. Like breaking his brains out across the floor didn't help. Actually, in all fairness, they were on the table. But it's a question of making certain these characters have a solid personality. Something that you can relate to. And again, if you've got a good character, make him somebody you want to root for. Make him something you care about. Okay, that the reader is going to relate to, one way or another. Each character, especially in third person, each character has to stand out. They've got to be memorable. Okay, and the more senses, like I said, the more senses you involve, the easier it is to hold the reader's attention. Now, like I said, Tanya was basically a hillbilly. Then you have, if we look at this, we jump a little ahead, because like I said, there's seven characters. This chap here. Now, understand, I have myself, I could care less what color somebody is, I think. I'm not sure. If I see somebody that's blue and frosty, I'm probably going to be concerned if that's a normal color. But understanding that the guy that built Blade, now this is Blade here, okay, the guy that built Blade, he was absolutely massively built. He was also Caucasian, okay, but the way Blade developed, it was not a question of will there be a fight when Blade walks into the room. It's a question of when. Okay, now most of these characters have a catchphrase. Okay, like in Blade's case, it's real simple. It's a good day for them to die. It's a play off the idea of it's a good day to die. Because Blade's got no intention on dying. So we take a look at it and you make sure as many senses as possible can be there. Give the characters heart. Okay. Give them something that when the reader reads it, or if it gets turned into a movie, the character does something, you watch it, the viewer will look at it and go, oh, this is not going to end well for that person. Okay, I wrote a scene in at one point where Jeremiah is told, okay, and this again is down the road, but Jeremiah was told, you don't have to worry about your friend Blade. He's already dead. He won't be, Blade won't be bothering you anymore. Right? And Jeremiah's going, okay, and he looks at the guy and he's trying to talk to him, and the door to the bar opens. And here comes Blade, walking through the door. He's got a body over his shoulder. Jeremiah looks at him and goes, Blade, I was told you were dead. Blade looks at him and goes, yeah, I was told the same thing. As he drops the body on the ground. Then it's just that kind of interaction. If you've got more than one character, more than one character in a scenario, make them memorable. If, like, I've been watching a lot of CSI, all right, a lot of Criminal Minds right now, every one of the main characters has a personality. They've got a background, and when they get into an environment, certain things happen, you can just see it. It's like, this is not going to end well for that person. Same thing applies. And of course, right now I'm focusing on science fiction, science fantasy. Now this particular book is the end of an epoch. It is actually book 11 in a 12 volume series. But if you look at this guy right in the middle here, that's Jeremiah still. But you have this chap here. This is one of the other characters. He's not one of the main ones from the story, but this is Kulak. He is actually a very good friend of Jeremiah's. But I mentioned things evolve as you go along. When I started writing The Birth of the Wolfpack, I knew it was going to be at least 2 volumes and might be a third. As it turned out, I ended up combining it so it's a complete trilogy and they end 3 books in a 4 trilogy series, each taking on a different age. Each interlocked with the rest. And what I found happening was when I got into dealing with the UFO side of things and the spiritual side, I managed to bring it all together. And when you take a look at this chap here, when you take a look at this chap here, where is he? This one. This is literally a Thrazazian. Now, if you take a look at the sides of him, a little bit on the large side. But I ended up, as I was writing this, I ended up adding this genre, reference. And Races of the Worlds is literally that. It gives you statistics, it will be giving you pictures. But that same reference manual brings to life, or more to the point, the Elderbrocky and Bakian Chronicles bring those races to life. So in the reference manual, you get the basic statistics, what their society is like, what their strengths and weaknesses are, justice systems, that sort of thing. But in the story, in the novels, you get to see how individuals interact. And again, the more senses you involve, the more you're going to hold the reader. When you're writing for children, the more happiness you can bring to them. Give them larger pictures, that are really colorful. The idea with a child is give them joy, give them happiness, give them something to relax. You don't give a 2-year-old, you don't sit there and read, War and Peace. Not a good idea. You write something that they can relate to. Now, again, you gotta be able to get inside the person's head in a sense. But creative writing is literally a question of taking an image from your mind and getting it on paper. Now, that said, I can write. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not the best. You would not believe, like my editor that is going through things now, you would not believe how pushy she is. I shouldn't say pushy, picky. She will spot discrepancies not in content necessarily, but in printing, in spelling, in using a word too often in short period. Okay. But I will tell you, for somebody that's blind, you would be absolutely amazed how much she can see. Okay. Now, when I started writing, it just came normally. Then I had a stroke and that really screwed up things. Okay. Because the first one came out easy. Now I'm trying to sort out things, and of course, day-to-day life will play havoc with your ability to write, with your ability to draw. It absolutely will. Life has this bad habit of getting in the way. Okay. Now, that said, again, you can picture a book this size. You can picture how much fun that's going to be to put together. They are pricey to put together. Okay, which is why if I am coming into an area and I'll bring a few of these with me, okay, the cost of the book itself in hard copy form with a signature is $40 plus shipping. Unfortunately, because I can't handle the price of shipping. Okay, not with the price they charge. Okay, but what I end up doing is I end up putting that back on the back end. To ship this one book cost me $25. Well, more than the point cost you, which means in your hand we're looking at 65 books for around 400 pages. Okay, but I did write it in bigger print, because what I found with most gamers, and quite frankly most readers, the small print is difficult to read. So I figured if I wrote it in slightly bigger print, it would be easier to read and therefore more enjoyable. But the real catch with science fantasy or science fiction is to write it in a relatable fashion. Keep it internally consistent. Okay, make certain that your characters are consistent. When you look at Wilhelm, his claim to fame is one bullet, at least one kill. Doesn't matter what he's doing. Okay, that's his claim. Just one bullet. Blade, it's a simple issue of it's a good day for them to die. Blade is a big boy. And as you can well imagine, with a name like that, and by the way, Blade was built before Blade, as in Wesley Snipes. Okay, Blade was built as an aftermath character before the Blade from the movies, played by Wesley Snipes, came out. Okay, same as if you take a look at the attire of Jeremiah. Scratch the gun and the sword. He was put together before the Undertaker from WWE came on the air. Okay, his attire was built way before that. Okay, now you got two other characters I brought into it as well. Think Blade, Wilhelm, Tanya, Jeremiah. Then you've got another character by the name of Mickey. Now, Mickey Finn, by the way, and if any of you are drinkers, you know what a Mickey Finn is. Okay, well, Mickey Finn was a character built by another gamer. Okay, and the question was always, did he even know the world went to heck in a handbasket? Mickey's always got a smile on his face. He's always laughing about something. Okay, in spite of the way the world is. Right? Now, that's Mickey. Then you have the other chap. And Mickey, of course, has his own background. He's got what brought him up. You find out about that in flashbacks and what have you. Okay, but then you got the last guy, which is Ozzy. Okay, now Ozzy is a grandfather. Okay, Ozzy is literally 66 years old at the beginning of the story. Okay, so he's got his own hindrances, but he was, he grew up trying to take care of kids. He's always got this attachment to the kids of the post-apocalyptic world. Okay, and like I said, when you're writing creatively, make sure the characters have something, they've got a relatable attitude to them. Okay, you've got to have them intertwined so these people become a family, as it were. Now, when I wrote the first manuscript, okay, when I wrote the first one, I only had 250 pages. Okay, and when I handed it off to a guy to proofread it, here just to get an idea, he read that. He says, "I'm going to read the book. I'm going to read a couple of chapters in the morning." Right? He phones me up at noon. He goes, "Keith, I finished reading the book, but I don't think you sent me the whole thing." He goes, I says, "Well, why?" He says, "I just don't think it's complete." I says, "Well," and we discussed a few things. I'm not going to tell you how this ends, but I asked him about the length of the story. I said, "Does it have 250 pages?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, and I listed off the word. I'm not going to tell you what it was. I says, "Was the last word on the last page this?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "No problem. You got the whole book." Now, bear in mind, the book was only 250 when I gave it to him. It is now approximately 400. Okay. And he says, but what happened to this, and this? I said, "Look, that is in the next book. Right? That does get answered. But, and understand, like I said, I'm a gamer. Okay, when I say write what you know, in The Birth of the Wolfpack, in this whole series, it's post-apocalyptic. The world has collapsed. But inside the story, I literally have a group of Dungeons and Dragons players that are in the game, in the story. And they are just gamers. They're just like other gamers. They've got their own ideas, their own stories. But they're just trying to play Dungeons and Dragons while the world collapses. Okay. The way I figured it, there are normal people out there. I'll use the term loosely. But again, you got to look at this from the standpoint of, is the story internally consistent? Now, that is the way that's working. Hopefully this is making sense. Now, if you've got an idea for writing a story, the first thing you want to do, that would be advisable, is get an idea of what it is. Just a very broad stroke. In my case, when I wrote The Birth of the Wolfpack, it was, I had so much fun with the people that we were gaming with, and in the game itself, that I decided I was going to write the story to commemorate it. So I started it in a bar. Then I let the story go. Okay. But I wrote about a story about a genre, about a field that I knew of. Okay. This is ultimately the way it's got to be done. If you've got a story, get an idea. Are you writing a story? Now, I am considering writing a first-person view, a story, or more to the point, an ongoing story through the newsletter. Okay, then I haven't figured out what I'm going to do with it yet. Okay, but it's going to be what I'm looking at is just an idea, and absolutely, your input would be appreciated. what I'm thinking of is getting a storyline down just a piece at a time over the next several months. And if that takes off well enough, I'll turn it into a book. Now, the other genre that I work in, as you know, is self-help. With self-help, okay, with those kinds of books, again, it's got to be internally consistent. Now, of course, where is it? In this one, in Believe in Yourself and Follow Your Dreams, okay, what I did was I broke it down into the fundamental steps that I personally took. Remember, write what you know. So I wrote it out in point form to start with. What did I do to overcome this problem? Okay, now this is not the only book out there. Okay, but you'll notice it's down to point form. But it's got to stay internally consistent. So when I started writing this, it's like, okay, what tools are virtually universal? What I discovered was this: everybody desires to be treated with respect. Okay, everybody desires to have a secure roof over their head. And I should put it this way: almost everybody. But there are variations in everything. And all I did was take a look at it. First of all, believe in yourself, as in look at your own self-esteem. Believe in your business, whether that is running a house or running a business. Same idea. Okay. Believe in your finances. This is the tools I use to identify what I'm doing. Now, of course, I will warn you about this. Number one, finances, very necessary. I'd have done a lot better if I'd have actually cared. But the problem is, and it's not an excuse, it's an explanation. Virtually everybody I knew that ended up with money ended up being absolutely miserable. And according to statistics, 90% of people that get a sudden windfall end up within 3 years in worse shape than they were before they got the windfall. Okay, so I started looking at these. What are the things that drive them? Okay, and again, I'm 61 now, so I spent 51 years counseling people at home, for their home and business. Okay, helping them see where the pitfalls were. And of course, considering I didn't care one way about money or the other, that didn't turn out very well for me. Okay, but what I did discover was that the people that were using the tools were benefiting by their account. Okay, now again, like that's science fiction, science fantasy, children's, self-help, alien, the reference manual, and poetry. Okay, now a friend of mine, okay, had a great story idea. Only he doesn't know how to write well. So we are co-writing it. Okay, come to think of it, I've got to get back to that. Okay, but he had a brilliant story that he had in his head that I've got to get on, because he gave the story to me and we talked about what he wanted to happen. Now I just got to put it to words. Then he'll go over it with me and then we'll get it to print. I am not putting deadlines on anything anymore. It doesn't work for me. Okay, as proven by the fact that I should have had Race of the Worlds out the second printing months ago, and the Return to Paradise, which is the third book in this series, it's the final book in the trilogy, that should have been out a couple of years back. But I will tell you, having a stroke really screws up on your writing. Not an excuse, just a reality. Okay. Now, what I'm looking at this point is, like I said, because I was looking at how do I make the newsletter more enjoyable. So what I'm thinking of doing, and your guys' input would be great, it'd be really appreciated. What I have come to understand is ultimately I'm going to have to make the decisions anyway. Oddly enough, I actually don't get as much feedback as would be really beneficial, but I am looking at writing a short, like basically a synopsis of a story idea over the next several months in the positive perspectives, just a creative endeavor. Okay, now the reality of it is, I'm looking at going, how do I make this happen? I got a couple of ideas. Somebody came to me with the idea of why not write an interactive story, i.e., here's what the scenario is. What are you going to do? And then give you and some of you will remember stories like this, where if you choose A, go to page such and such. If you choose B, go to page such and such. Okay. And the trick is you never go back. So I'm looking at that as another possibility. I don't have a problem with writing. I have a problem with having too many things to put down and not enough time. Okay, when you're doing something that grabs your attention, that you've got a passion for, it becomes very easy to follow it. Okay, but I caution you, you still have to make room for life. Okay, absolutely imperative. Now, where are we here? So I do hope this is making sense. And again, I will tell you this. In addition to the writing I'm doing, because I know there's a lot of you out there that have tried writing. You've got a short story, you've got a poem, and the basic way that the whole scenario goes, okay, is this: write your story, ship it off to, and this came from the industry and from people in the industry. You send your manuscript off to 100 different publishers, and here's what happens. If I've been told by many people, if you get 3 responses, usually rejections, you're lucky. Usually they do one of 2 things: throw it in the garbage and don't even bother looking at it, or they read it, go, it's not good enough. I've heard countless people have come to me and said, well, I wrote a story I thought was really good, and I was told it wasn't long enough, or it wasn't good enough. Well, let's get something straight. Okay, let's get something straight about whether it's good enough. There are 8 billion plus people on the planet. Okay, now I knew a guy, and I talked to him directly. He was a painter. Okay, and painting and writing is the same thing. He was a painter, and he took his book, or he took a white canvas, a standard painting canvas. Okay, it was just white. He took off-white paint, painted the whole canvas white. Okay, took baseboard wood framing. Okay, just that simple stuff you see the baseboards made out of. Put it around the canvas. He called the piece Whiteout. Okay, and he sold the thing for $1 million. Okay, now I don't know how much talent you think you've got, but it's got to be more than that. I'm just checking something really bizarre here. Where are we here? the neat part about it is that is literally, as easy a run as you can get. Okay. We had cartoons, I think back in the 2000s, somebody did a cartoon series that ended up on TV. Okay. Ended up on TV. It was Stick Men. Now, I'm not good at drawing. Okay. In my eyes, I'm not. Although I must say, I'm not unhappy with what I did with Dreamcatcher. Okay. But if you've got a story, what I am looking at is this. And again, it relies on my getting money turned around. But I will be looking at people that have a single short story, a single poem. Now, I will tell you, I will not publish myself. I will not publish adult entertainment or erotica, if you will. I won't do it. It's not that it's not good. It's I won't do it. Okay, it's just that simple. Now, that may change down the road, but I'm not holding my breath. Okay, I also will not publish anything that promotes the idea of overthrowing a government, and I'm talking a real-time government, not one that is, oh, we've got this science fiction story, and it's based around the government being overthrown. I don't have a problem with that. I won't publish something that directly relates to this world, talking about overthrowing a government or some sort of mass terror thing. I won't do it. This does not mean that that's not a good story. It means I won't do it. Okay, in time, I will be putting together a short story anthology. Okay, as well as a poetic anthology. And those I will end up taking submissions to. But the catch, there's a whole lot of things that go with that. But the real kicker to it is this. When you have that in place, okay, once you have that laid out, now we have a neat little setup. Okay, that neat little setup is when I get to the point that I can do that, I will be taking these on. I will do my best to respond to people, but the thing I won't do is go, oh, that's not good enough. Okay, this much I know, because there are authors out there that are phenomenal authors. They've got phenomenal potential. Maybe you're a poet along the lines of Robert Service or Robert Frost. I'm sure there's some other really good ones out there. I just don't know them. Okay, but the idea is to help people bring their dreams to life. Okay, I got all kinds of ways of looking at that. Marketing is not my strong suit yet. And you'll notice the term yet. When we are looking at creative writing, creative endeavors in anything, there's an old saying that goes, an artist never completes their artwork. They simply stop drawing. Same thing applies to authors. They don't usually complete the story. They take a chunk out of the middle and go, this is what I'm writing on. This is what I'm expanding on. Okay. But in doing that, at some point you end up stopping. Now, when I wrote The Birth of the Wolf Pack, I was 3 chapters from the end of the book before I knew where it was going. Okay. 3 chapters. And I looked at it and went, I'm going to have to tie it off. So I wound it down, finished the story off so the wolf pack was together. Okay. And then started the next one. But the thing is, some of you have some phenomenal ideas. Okay. Unfortunately, even amongst the bunch of you, what I find is many people, they're afraid to come up with an idea or to voice it because, well, what if somebody thinks it's stupid? Or what if somebody thinks it's a silly idea? I'm telling you, if you've got a story that you think would be good for a kid, Silly is where it's at. Getting them to laugh is the key. Storm, thank you so much for that. Just been informed we're down to 30 minutes. One of the things we have to remember is whether we are writing a children's story, an adult story, a teenager story, doesn't matter. The more senses you involve, the better off it is. Operation Shutdown, how are you? Glad you could join us. I noticed you hadn't gotten in here earlier, so I'm hoping everything is going well. When you're writing the story, you've got to have a start, a middle, and a finish. Well, in The Birth of the Wolfpack, you start with Jeremiah. In the middle, he meets the rest of his crew. There's a lot that goes on. And at the end of it, all 7 of the characters are together. But I will warn you, I think it's about halfway through. I think it's about halfway through the book. Where is the index? There we go. Yeah. 31 chapters. In the 16th chapter is when you meet the last member of the Wolfpack. So that's the middle. By the end of the book, all 7 members of the Wolfpack are together. They formed a solid Wolfpack. Okay, and the group of friends. And they're set up to head on the next adventure. Well, the neat part when you're writing is to have an idea. What is the story? What is the culmination of it? If you know where you're starting, which starts in one place, let the story write itself. You don't have to control everything, but it would be advisable to track it. Now, in the case of first person, okay, I'm looking at the idea of writing writing both, really, a first person and an interactive. Okay, the interactive is going to be an interesting little situation. Okay, and I don't know how I'm going to do it just yet. That's one of the problems, but it was suggested. Now, I wonder, I don't have them here. Back, and I think it might have been the 90s or 2000s, might have been even in the 80s. There used to be books out that were literally adventure books where you get this character and this is you that you're starting with. What are you going to do? If you're doing A, turn to page such and such. If you're doing B, turn to page such and such. Okay, now it was suggested I put one of these together, and I am going to do it. I just have to get organized and make certain I'm making things happen one step at a time. Okay, but again, there's got to be a start and a finish. Now I'm thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody's got any insight, I'm thinking when it comes to the interactive, write one story that has a definitive, here's what you do. If you take this path, you're going to end up with these outcomes. Okay. If you go through door A and opens the door, you walk through, write the whole scenario out on how you win. Then what I'm going to do is give a bunch of offshoots that'll lead to a collapse. Okay, that'll lead to an end. Now, whether there will be more than one way of finishing, of actually finishing the book, that's the ideal operation. Okay. I will have the one definitively written. There may be a second one, a second road to come through. Because I'm a firm believer that there is more than one way to finish just about anything. Okay. The odds are that, and of course, being a gamer, the neat part about it is if you're a gamer, then it's like, do this, make this roll. grab 2 dice. And if you roll this, this is where you go. If you roll this and anything else, you go down this road. Okay. These are things that are interactive and they give you all kinds of different outcomes. Okay. The idea is to find a way to make things a little bit more enjoyable. Now, my writing a solid story in the positive perspectives. Oh, there you go. Yeah, LA goes me too. I had maybe 30 or 40 variations. And I'm thinking if I go down that road, if I'm just telling a story, that's one thing. Okay. The interactive is going to be something that I'm going to have to look at. I don't know how long how long the book will be, or for that matter, which way it's going to go. But there's a number of books I'm in the middle of actually writing, okay, that I've got to start getting racked off before I start writing another one. And in case you haven't noticed, if you've got 33 books you're writing concurrently, I've got no shortage of material. Okay, no shortage at all. But I do happen to be a little scattered on occasion. When I'm looking at creative writing, oddly enough, the creative mind for writing is the same thing. Yeah, it's just a terrible idea. LA goes, that sounds like a novel approach. Forgive the pun. Yeah, but, when you're looking at life, creative writing actually gives you the same idea. Pick a direction, you make the choice, you make the decision, and you're the one that gets the outcome. This is why you've heard me do it. If you listen to me at all, okay, I'll be talking away and all of a sudden I'll go, think, then speak. Okay, and the fact of the matter is, I am looking at a way, I'm striving to find a way to make things a little more interactive. Now, here's the kicker, and this is just an idea, I'm just throwing it out there. I could do the same thing with the read your own story or write your own story by literally laying it out. And let's hear what we got for input on this one. If I take the first scene, okay, and I read this in the first scene, and at the end of the first scene, I go, where are we? Oh, nice, LA. I gotta ask, have you gotten any of them published? I'm thinking if I read the first scene out and then go, okay, these are your two options. You can either do A or B and go with whoever types in the first answer. Okay. And that's the next step in the story. Now, I'm thinking this is a way to actually get a story written over the course of time with a lot of different input. Okay. I am curious what your guys' take on it is. And again, I'm not looking at an issue of going into any sort of political treaties. Okay. I'm looking at an entertainment factor here. And we'll see what happens. But, I'd love to hear what your guys' idea would be on that. Because I will tell you, the number of times that I've asked a question and literally gotten virtually no response. If that's the case, it won't work anyway. But when you're looking at creative writing, and I get a kick out of it, as a child, you're encouraged to live in an imaginary world, to make things up, okay, to have fun. As you get older, you turn around and the parents turn around and say, okay, now grow up and it's time to grow up and act your age. But we look at reality. Okay, take a look at reality. Imagination is what gets all the technology that you've got. All of it came about because somebody used their imagination. Now, granted, many times they pulled out of nature to get an idea, to get inspiration. Okay, but I'm looking at it going, you have to have your imagination because what we're being fed in mainstream society, mainstream media, mainstream politics, mainstream religion, you get the idea, is a very depressing outlook. We gotta find a way to imagine a better, more enjoyable world. Okay, that's the key to turning things around, is letting our imagination burn in a bonfire together, okay, to make this world something to look forward to. Now, the neat part there is if I go about the road and go down the road, if I go down that road, what would end up happening? And I'm not planning on shutting this down anytime soon. But here's the neat little kicker to it. If I go down that road, then what would happen is I'd lay it out, we'd write it as I went along. One option, and I won't even know where it's going really. Here's the scenario. Now, one option is you do this. And if that happens, here's the outcome. Okay. And end up by the end of it, turning around and going joint effort. It was a joint effort, joint ideas that came out of positive perceptions. Okay. It was a joint effort by all the people in the chat room. I won't be listing off all the names by any functional stretch. Okay. And it literally, yes, it means I'd be drawing on your guys' ideas. Absolutely. But realistically, if we take a look at that, okay, realistically, we could do some phenomenal work. Now, I know I can write. Clearly, if I'm writing science fiction, science fantasy, reference, poetry, children's, okay, and reference. I missed that. Science fiction, and self-help. Clearly, I don't have a shortage. By the way, the idea of the other story I mentioned, a friend of mine asked me to co-write a book. Okay, it is a detective book. Okay, I am no detective per se in my eyes. He came up with the idea of a scenario. Okay, of a series of scenarios. And all I got to do is put it to paper. But I will tell you, fighting depression, thank you very much for that, LA. Fighting depression has been absolutely detrimental to my being able to move forward. Okay, to my being able to get these projects finished. Oh, by the way, speaking of finishing, the 6th book of the Nature Encyclopedia that I've been reading is now complete. I finished reading the 6th one, so now I got to start on the 7th. I'm still working on the other 2, the Bible and Game of Thrones, but I now have to start reading. I've now got to start reading the 7th volume of the Nature Encyclopedia. Again, guys, reading enhances your mind. Okay, now I will tell you, there is some stuff that you can read. I'm questioning whether it enhances your mind, but then I read certain things. I don't read a lot. I write a staggering amount. Okay, and the reality behind it is this. The key factor in creative writing is creative. Take an idea and let that idea take on its own life. Okay, let the characters come to life. When I take a look at some of the characters I've got, okay, some of the supporting characters, Because remember, you've got in the Birth of the Wolf, in the Elderbachian Chronicles, you've got your 7 main characters in the Birth of the Wolf Pack. But we've got the bar, Casey's Bar and Grill, which, as you can well imagine, belongs to Casey. Okay, and I've got that laid out very well. So when you walk in my eyes anyway, when you walk into the bar and you start reading the layout, I do my best to let you feel like you're in the bar. Okay, so you can hear the sounds in the background. Just to give you an example, the drum set is set up as a normal drum. But you notice when you're looking at drummers, okay, and they're pounding away on the drums and their hand comes up and spins around and they carry on. Well, I went a little different. On the back wall, behind the drummer, right behind the drummer, okay, he's playing around, comes up and he hits the drum snare behind him. Okay, now it's not an actual snare, but I took the whole apocalyptic thing, worked it in, so when you take a look at this stage, there's the scene in front of you. I did my best to make it so that you feel like you're sitting in a bar, okay, and this band is playing. Now, the more senses you can involve, the better off you are. The more detail that you can include. And understand, Jeremiah is not laid out as in, oh, he's got this hat and this coat and this body build. It's not laid out all at once. Okay, it's laid out in basic, and then bits and pieces are added throughout the story. Same with Wilhelm, with Tanya. There's a lead waitress. Okay, now I will tell you this. And we are down to 13 minutes. I will tell you this. In the Elderbachian Chronicles, okay, number one, I literally took a map of Kelowna, okay, the city I live in, okay, and I took the names of the streets, and I just simply moved them around, moved the letters around. I forget what that's called, okay, but I rearranged letters, like, for instance, the main city in the Elderbachian Chronicles is Kinelo. Okay, I simply rewrote the words, rewrote the letters. Okay, but virtually every character, whether it is a main character or a supporting character, is based on somebody that I knew. I'll change the names and change, but I can look at that person. There we go. LA calls it a lexigram. So different cities, different street names are all lexicograms. Okay. And then the people, virtually every one of them is based on somebody that I personally know, I personally met, or an event that I have been born witness to. I didn't bother with the idea of creating other ones most of the time. Okay, most of the characters are right out of somebody I know. The primary waitress happens to be based on a character on a person that I knew ages back, in this case, decades. It was literally, the personality was literally based on the person's personality. Their general appearance started off that way. And the thing was, with the main character, Kathy, okay, she's based on a person that was actually the first redhead I ever personally met. But she had an absolutely perfect personality. Okay, so I just took that because what that did was it gave me a framework where I could look at that character and go, here's what that character looks like. Here's how they behave. Okay, there is another character that I built into it by the name of Rhonda. Okay, Now, Rhonda is based on a person I personally knew, but her personality was absolutely incredible. Her skill set in in the books is not what her personal skill set was. Rest assured, because Rhonda is a character that in the books she is a demolitions expert. Okay, absolutely stark raving mad, absolutely squirrely as Murdoch. Okay, Murdoch from the A Team, absolutely squirrely. Okay, but that was, I mean, the person I knew was bizarre. She had the weirdest outlook on life. That's saying a lot coming from me. So what I found was I found people, virtually every character I know, virtually everyone. There's a lot of kids in the orphans that you run into that are not based on other people. Okay, a lot of the orphans were not based on other people. Most of the adults are, whether they're mainstream or supporting characters. Okay, a lot of them, I absolutely know where they come from. Now, the neat part is you can always throw in an interesting little twist in things. You take a look at the main characters. They're all human, they're humanoid. Okay. Some of them aren't entirely human. But what you find is that they all have their personalities. And like I said, I've been gaming. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons, Champions, Aftermath. What was it called now? There was one really early, not Omega. I know that Storm knows it. It was a game that came out before D&D. Okay, I do know it started with an O. I just can't off the top of my head remember. Wonder if I actually popped it in here. Just trying to scan through. And just trying to scan ain't gonna work. But bearing in mind I'm a gamer, some of these characters do come up. Okay. Now, with this in mind, notice we've hit the 5-minute mark. That said, what am I doing tomorrow? I got a good memory. It's just really short on occasion. There we go. Now, we are at the 5-minute mark. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about bringing your fictional world to life. Understand, this means not only in a creative writing standpoint, but in the real world. That'll happen tomorrow at between 4:30 and whenever we get done. That said, thank you so much for sharing your time with us tonight. Really appreciate it. I will be back again tomorrow. But until then, do take care of yourselves and each other. And for